Now, there's no doubt about the quality that Mesut Özil possessed as a player, from his dribbling ability to his ball playing ability, and he really laid the foundations for number 10s in Germany and in German football you see today, such as Jamal Musiala and Florian Wirtz. I mean, he's played for some of the biggest clubs in Spain at Real Madrid and Germany, Werder Bremen and Schalke, while also playing for Arsenal, and was also a key player during Germany's 2014 World Cup win. But from 2018 onwards, it was downhill from him before he retired in 2023. But now 37-year-old sees himself as a bit of a political figure, and it's time to look at what has happened to Mesut Özil. Now, for clarity and legality, everything I say here is a suggestion and not an accusation at all. Özil was born in Gelsenkirchen to Turkish parents who had moved to the Ruhr as Gastarbeiter, or guest workers, and obviously, as I said, he came through the ranks at Schalke, moved to Werder Bremen, then Real Madrid and then Arsenal, while also being a mainstay in the German national team. Now, the beginning of this story starts in 2018 and a couple months before the World Cup in Russia. Özil, along with İlkay Gündoğan, who is also a former Germany player with Turkish heritage, but as you'll see, Gündoğan has, when we get into this, Gündoğan has not had the same sort of impact that has happened to Özil since this event. So in May in London, along with Gündoğan and another player called Cenk Tosun, who is also German born, they met and was playing for Everton at the time. They met with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Why is this important? Well, Erdogan, both inside and outside of Turkey, is a divisive figure. Since becoming a leader in the country, first as Prime Minister and then President, Erdogan has developed Turkey into a bit more of an authoritarian regime. He's really caused inflation to rise to ungodly high levels. It peaked at 85% in 2022. He's repressive against not only his political opposition, getting a potential candidate against him in the president election arrested, having protesters voicing their displeasure at him arrested, and generally quite a bit of corruption too. Add to this, Erdogan and his political party, the Justice and Development Party, also known as the AKP, are an Islamist party, which means they're conservative Democrats. They have strong roots in the teachings of Islam, and they've been in power since 2002 when they won the general election. However, Erdogan wasn't the one to win the general election this time, as he has a previous criminal conviction, because in the time Erdogan was making his breakthrough in politics, Turkey was a very secular country, and anything really heavily Islamist was seen as illegal, and Erdogan read out a poem which was heavily Islamist, and he would be sent to prison for that. And so he couldn't run for MP anymore. So someone else, and another member of the party, was then voted as Prime Minister, until a couple of months after the election, the party, the AKP, made a constitutional amendment so Erdogan could now become Prime Minister. He then held office for 3 terms before being given the role of president, which he's held and won in elections since 2014. So the meeting of Özil, Gündoğan and Tosun with Erdogan, he's a politician, and this is quite clearly a political move from him, as this was a way to tap into German Turkish voters who can actually vote in Turkish elections. So if obviously these big players, especially Özil and Gündoğan in the context of the national team, are pictured with Erdogan, then other Turkish Germans will be like, okay, if they support him, so can we. In Germany, this was seen completely differently, and this was seen as Özil and Gündoğan showing their support for Erdogan. And then this is really like the downfall for Özil then. Germany ultimately would crash out of the World Cup that summer, and after that Özil would, on social media, come out posting his response to everything, saying him and Erdogan only spoke about football during this meeting, which is something that should be remembered. And during this outburst, he came out with the statement in "I'm German when we win and an immigrant when we lose." He then retired from the international team and also criticised some of the people within the DFB for potential racism and prejudice against Özil. And so he would never play for the German national team again. Well, Gundogan obviously would retire in 2024 after the Euros, where he was captain. In 2019, Özil would get married to his longtime partner, who is former Miss Turkey, with Erdogan one of the best men at his wedding. Then in 2021, Özil would move to Turkey and play for Fenerbahce for 2 seasons. Fenerbahce is supposedly the club that Erdogan had a trial at as a footballer. But if you see the way Erdogan kicks a football, no chance in hell he would have been a professional footballer. And then he also spent a season in Istanbul Başakşehir, a club who were founded by the local Istanbul government when Erdogan was mayor of the city. And the former chairman is related to Erdogan through marriage and also a member of the AKP. Well, they share similar colours to the AKP party, and Erdogan himself played in a testimonial friendly game at the club and wore the number 12, which is ultimately retired by the club. But remember, Özil and Erdogan only spoke about football. So since retiring from football, Özil has spent a lot of time in the gym and he's become quite big. And when Özil was a player, he was very slim and quite slender, and you could see that. And so when we get to this, in 2023, after his retirement, he starts in the gym. Then in 2024, there's an argument that he could potentially be on steroids because of the big difference in him, not only from his playing as a player, but also it's not possible to make that much difference in mass and size in just a year, especially with how lean Özil was when he started. Plus, if you look at his shoulders too, not ideal. And you may be thinking, how can I say this, such a blatant allegation? You may not be able to see it, but I also am a gym goer, so I do kind of know. But obviously, as I said, that Özil's fitness journey is where things get interesting. In 2023, after his retirement, the former player's personal trainer posted a picture on Instagram where Özil had his shirt lifted up, and then on his chest is a tattoo containing the 3 crescent moon as well as a wolf. Now, there's quite a bit to unpack here. So the 3 crescent moon is a reference to the National Movement Party in Turkey, who used the 3 crescent moon symbol. This party is a far-right nationalist party who've been linked with a paramilitary group known as the Grey Wolves, which is the meaning behind the wolf tattoo. And the National Movement Party are not just some peripheral group either. In 2018, they helped the AKP earn a majority in the presidential election, thus meaning another term for Erdogan. Now, the Grey Wolves, in Kazakhstan, they're known as a terrorist organisation, but in the context of Europe, they're actually a banned organisation in France. They also have their own salute. It goes like this, and it became infamous in 2024 when Turkey defender Mesut Özil did the salute after scoring against Austria in the round of 16, and said salute is also illegal in Austria. And Erdogan then would show support for Demirel after his suspension from this salute, which should kind of tell you everything you need to know. Part of the Grey Wolf ideology is Turkey should be only for pure Turkish people. Obviously, in the eastern part of Turkey, there's a big there's Kurdistan, which isn't a real nation, but there's a large group of Kurdish people in there. And so they do not like them. And they also want Turkey to be based on Sunni Islam. In the context of Germany, they have also financially backed, along with Erdogan, a criminal gang called Osmanen Germania. Osmanlı Germania have been banned in Germany because of what they get up to. Now, like, what has this all got to do with Özil? Well, at the beginning of 2025, Özil will become a board member of the AKP as a member of what the website is called the Central Decision and Executive Committee. Basically meaning he has a high-ranking role in the context of the major political party in Turkey. And if you want to look deeper into this, Özil on social media follows the leader of the NMP, Devlet Bahçeli. He also follows the NMP on Instagram. Obviously, this is a very modern way of assuming support. Obviously, I have to make this clear. Özil has never came out and stated his political opinions on such matters. He's never voiced his opinions on the Grey Wolves, the National Movement Party, whatever. He obviously has been vocal about important issues on his social media in the past, such as Palestine or the Uyghur Muslims in China, which obviously had an effect on his Arsenal career too. But when it comes to the politics of Turkey, he's been very quiet. However, getting specific symbols of these, rather from a Western point of view, controversial organisations tattooed on your body, I think is a case of the actions speak louder than the words. And so it's safe to say that the legacy of Özil, especially in Germany, is just being increasingly tarnished. And it's best shown at the beginning of 2025, when Werder Bremen were hosting a testimonial for Diego, obviously the Brazilian that was at Bremen in the late 2000s. He helped them win the Pokal, he helped them reach the final of the Europa League, and he was teammates with Özil when both played at the Weserstadion. And so at this testimonial, there were the likes of Naldo and Per Mertesacker. However, it was decided by the club and Diego that Özil would not be invited due to these links to the far right in Turkey. Now, if you're Turkish and watching this, obviously my Western opinion and way of doing things probably could be way out of touch. However, considering that an increasing number of Gen Z are against Erdogan, it seems to be the tides could be changing for the long-time leader. Well, for Özil, he was obviously once a poster child for multiculturalism in Germany. But since 2018, he's continued to follow this route of the Turkish far right and just right-wing politics. If you look at the German team now, and how many are of dual nationality, Alexander Pavlovic, Asano Diogo, Karim Adeyemi, Voldemar Anton, just to name a few. These players have kind of had their foundation laid to them by that. Obviously, by the likes of Özil. Obviously, there's other players like Jamal Asamoah, who I'm pretty sure was the first black player to play for Germany. But players like these are some of the first to lay the foundations for these players today. And obviously, Özil has completely, more or less, ruined his reputation or anything because of this. I mean, even fellow people around the same time as him, like Sami Khedira, haven't done anything like this. Although Khedira is Tunisian. From Özil's point of view, you could point to the rise of the AfD in Germany and the reluctance for some people to accept people integrating into the country. And this, as a result, makes them feel ostracized, and despite potentially being born in Germany, they don't feel German and instead look to move to somewhere like Turkey, where they feel they could be more accepted for who they are, which is, you can make the argument, has happened in the case of Özil. But obviously this is what has happened to Mesut Özil since his retirement. He's obviously, I'm not going to say he's a grifter because this isn't exactly grifting, but he's gone down a questionable path, especially considering where he was. But as I said, there's no questioning Özil's ability as a footballer. It's just you can question everything else afterwards, especially the fact that he's connected to these groups of people who want to try and ostracize even groups of people in Turkey itself and get rid of them. And in a sense, could be quite ironic, considering how basically Özil has just left Germany after this, and considering how he left Germany, you could make the argument that with his support of the likes of the NMP and the Grey Wolves especially, it's quite hypocritical of him to be doing all of this, especially when he's done other like good stuff like the Uyghur and raising concern about Palestine. But going down this route is very hypocritical. So I think that's the one takeaway from this. You know, Özil is a great footballer, but his quite obvious connection, whether he's open about it or not, is hypocritical of him. It's an obvious connection when it's tattooed on you. And I think his support of those sort of groups, especially with how he's left Germany, is really hypocritical. And as I said, it has tarnished his legacy. And in comparison to like some of the other World Cup winners in 2014, Özil could probably be long forgotten. 20 years down the line, when you have a reunion for like these players that won, like it probably wouldn't be a surprise if Özil doesn't turn up. In a way, you know, Özil choosing this route is also partially down to the culture in Germany. I still think a lot of the media, looking at Bild, is still very conservative and can very descend into racism very quickly. So I think that situation doesn't help trying to ostracize Özil and push him away. But like, you can also stand and choose to fight and make it stand and become like kind of a leader for like this next generation of people, for example. Instead he's chosen this route where he just looks like a massive hypocrite. So yeah, obviously let me know what you think. Obviously, if some of the stuff I've said is outright incorrect in terms of like the content, then please let me know, because I'd rather be corrected than just dismiss you as being I'm right 100% of the time. But yeah, let me know what you think. Don't try and descend this into something it shouldn't be when we're talking about the legacy of Özil. But yeah, let me know what you think about Özil and choices post-playing career.